We've been getting asked a lot whether the Mummy Pod sleep system is comfortable. A lot of hammock campers are sleeping on a diagonal in their hammock, whereas the Mummy Pod sleep system is going to make you sleep in a straight line. So in this video, I wanted to go over why sleeping in a straight line can be comfortable, and also why it has some advantages. The concerns of sleeping straight in your hammock versus on a diagonal are, one, that you're bent a little bit in the night, where I'm not laying completely flat, right? You can see that I'm bent a little bit here. The other concern is that my knees are gonna hyperextend over the course of the night. Now, it's not a drastic hyperextend, but it's enough to be uncomfortable. The third concern would be that you're getting shoulder squeeze. Now, shoulder squeeze is just when the hammock is putting pressure on the sides of your body, and your shoulders being usually one of your widest parts, you're gonna feel it more in that particular area. So as I'm laying in here, concern is that I'm getting squoze sideways. Now, those are three legitimate concerns, but let's talk about why they're not issues. All right, so this is a double person hammock, about a 10.5 foot hammock, and probably 6 feet wide, which is classified as a double hammock in which you could sleep on a diagonal. Now, in a single person hammock, the argument is that you can't sleep on a diagonal, whereas in a double person hammock, you could sleep on a diagonal. So let's go ahead and give this a shot, and I'll show you what people are typically doing in these double hammocks. So what they're trying to do is sleep on an angle. So they put their foot off to the side, and then you sleep with your head off to the side as well, right? You're in a diagonal according to where your straps are. As you can see though, this hammock is not the best for sleeping on a diagonal. Even though it's twice as heavy as our other hammock, I'm still getting the common concerns, right? I'm still getting this ridge underneath my calf. I don't necessarily have a good foot box. My head is almost hanging out, and I'm getting rolled. So I'm getting pressure right here pushing my body this way, pressure back pushing my body this way, and then I've got pressure here pushing me this way. So I feel like I'm getting spun in about 3 different directions. So obviously this isn't a good hammock to sleep diagonal in. So I'm going to get an even kind of bigger and heavier and more expensive hammock to show you what truly sleeping in a diagonal looks like. All right, just for a quick reference, this is the hammock and strapping I'm about to set up. This is the Outdoor Vitals hammock and strapping. This has a bug net on it, so it is going to be a little bit bigger due to that bug net, but you can kind of see the size here before I set them up. I also need to stake out the head and the foot end in order for it to keep its position. All right, so this is what it looks like when it's all set up. Let me get in and show you what the diagonal lay looks like. All right, so here I am on the diagonal lay. This is definitely more comfortable, but my head is kind of going to be hitting this bug net. So anyways, this is what an expensive diagonal lay hammock looks like, and how you would use it. Now you can see here, I'm not going to get really bent in half. I'm laying flatter in the hammock, and because it is a very, very large and wide hammock, I'm not getting as much of that twisting effect like I was talking about. Actually, quite a bit less. Other quick notes, I would have to play around with this to get the calf ridge to go away, because I am getting pressure right underneath my calf. That could go away, but then I'm still getting a little bit of hyperextension in my knees. Again, that could be user error, but it's still concerns, still things that you have to worry about, even in this hammock, laying more flat. All right, so let's put this away and put up our single person Outdoor Vitals hammock, which is more of the recommended hammock for the Mummy Pod. We're gonna go ahead and set that up, and then we'll talk about how you can overcome some of these concerns with sleeping in a straight line versus on a diagonal, and why I don't feel like they're concerns, and why I still prefer single person hammocks and sleeping in a straight line. All right, so we've got the single person hammock set up. Let's go ahead and lay in it and see if some of these concerns can't be overcome. All right, so the very first concern that people had was that you were sleeping in a bent position or like a banana. Now you can see here, I'm not really sleeping like a banana in this. I do have a little bit of a curve, but not much at all. And that's more so because in a shorter hammock like this, you don't have as much of that fabric swaying down. So it's a little bit easier to get a flatter lay in a straight line position in a shorter hammock. You'll also notice that my suspension might be just a little bit tighter or or unless a little bit of an angle than a 30-degree angle, which is kind of common practices to hang your hammock on a 30-degree angle. I always say hang it on at least a 30-degree angle, maybe go just a hair smaller than that, which would mean tighter, and that also helps you sleep more in a straight line. So let's talk about hyperextension, because that also plays into laying flat. You will see that my knees are a little bit hyperextended, and over the course of a whole night that could become uncomfortable. So my number one tip when you are sleeping like this is to bring something to put behind your knees. Now you can easily use something like a jacket, right? I've just got a down jacket right here I could shove behind my knees. That works perfect. My personal preference though is to use an inflatable pillow. This is our prototype. We'll be having some more of these out, but the reason this just keeps its form a little better. You don't have a sleeve slide down or anything like that. Not big concerns, but I've just found it works a little bit better. And I'll take this and I'll put that right behind my knees. Now my knees aren't hyperextending, but not only that, when I bend my knees like this, now this is over exaggerated to show the point. When I bend my knees like this, it changes the position of my back. So when I lay completely flat, I've got a little bit of a bow in my back, right? Your back kind of has this arc in it. When I bend my knees, it takes away that arc a little bit so that my back suddenly is straighter. And that is way more comfortable for me. By sleeping with that under my knees and changing the position of my back, it helps my back feel better. I have lower back issues. I've got some disc issues in my low back, and I sleep in the straight line hammock all the time. Don't have any issues. Also keep in mind that this inflatable air pillow is 1, maybe 2 ounces. I believe it's just right in that ballpark. So it weighs almost nothing. And I do pack this whether I'm sleeping on the ground or in a hammock. I just change the position of where I'm using it. All right, so let's jump back to the last concern that we talked about, which is shoulder squeeze, right? When you're laying in here in a tighter hammock with less material width-wise, you're gonna get more shoulder squeeze. You can have issues with this, but they're easily remedied. Now, I advise when you hang a mummy pod sleep system to hang the bottom of it about 10 to 12 inches from the gathered end. It just makes it easier to seal up and to keep the air out at all times. So also the next benefit of doing that is your shoulders now go in the widest part of the hammock. So you can see my feet right here are about a foot or more away from that gathered end, but my shoulders are almost to the middle of this, which gives them more room inside this hammock, which means less shoulder squeeze. Now, one other tip that most people don't realize in a hammock is you don't have to sleep only on your back. I'll rotate sideways just like this, kind of bring this hip up, and I'll sleep just like this, and I can spend half the night like that, and then if I feel like I need to roll again, I can roll back the other way. But I typically sleep in 3 different positions, on my back, one side, or the other. Now, and that makes it a lot more comfortable for me just because I'm used to sleeping on my side. That's how I sleep when I'm home in bed. So again, I find this system really comfortable. I spent over 20 nights in it just in this last 10 or so months as we were doing some testing with this mummy pod system. I find it more comfortable than our 3.5-inch thick pad, which is the most comfortable sleeping pad I've ever slept on. So that must say something. So if you're having a hammock camped, you're gonna love it when you give it a shot. But I find sleeping in a straight position is still extremely comfortable. So let's jump over and talk about some of the advantages of sleeping in a straight line in a solo hammock with a mummy pod. First, by sleeping in a straight hammock, you're gonna cut off about half the weight and the bulk of your hammock. If you go to a bigger double person hammock, you're using about twice as much material. The weight of your hammock sometimes doubles, and then you just have more material to pack with you as well. Next, I only have to carry 1 piece of insulation rather than 2. See, if I use this system right here, now I've got an underquilt and a top quilt that I have to pack and carry versus just my mummy pod. The reason that is now we can use our insulation to map it around it perfectly. There's no overlap. Everything is being used extremely efficiently. It's an extremely efficient use of the down that you've purchased and that you've packed out there on the trail. So it's a lot less bulky to carry these. 2, it's a lot cheaper. When you go to a bigger hammock, you're buying more fabric and more materials. When you go to a mummy pod versus a 2-part system with a top quilt and an underquilt, there's also an added cost. Typically, you can save about half by going to the mummy pod system compared to a top and underquilt. All that being said, there is a time and a place for everything. If I'm trying to be extremely light, fast, and simple, or if I need to save a little bit of money, I choose the single person hammock with the mummy pod. It's just faster, it's lighter, it takes less space in my pack. If I was hiking the PCT or the AT trail, spending weeks, if not months, in my hammock, then I might look at getting a double person hammock so that I can feel more comfortable, I can change my position more, and I can mix things up while I'm on the trail. I like to relate these two systems to a twin mattress versus a queen mattress. See, if you're only out for a few days or maybe even a week, sleeping in a twin mattress really isn't going to be a big issue for you. But if you're going to spend your whole life in that, say months or weeks upon weeks in that system back to back, you might find it more advantageous to use the queen mattress, right? Or the double person hammock. Either way, we should have you covered here at Outdoor Vitals. We are going to be releasing our top quilt later on this year, as well as a double person hammock. I just wanted to share some of the reasons why I actually prefer the single person hammock with the mummy pod system, because most of my trips are a few days at a time, and it's lighter, faster, and it's more affordable.